Hi, I'm Fortune Senior Editor Beth Kowitt. Staying connected has perhaps never been more important than now, and as we've just seen, sometimes challenging. 11 months ago, the main concern in terms of connectivity was if our computers were working properly from home and how to hold remote team meetings. That's, of course, essential, especially when it comes to collaboration. But there's also a vitally important social component that can't be overlooked when talking about workforce connectivity. Joining us now for a conversation on the changing ways of communication and practical tools to keep us all connected are Taher Behbehani, General Manager and Head of Mobile B2B Business Unit, Samsung Electronics America, Marlo Gaal, Senior Vice President and Chief Talent Officer, Ariel Investments, Alastair Simpson, Vice President of Design at Dropbox, and Grace Zuncic, Chief People and Culture Officer at Chobani. So thank you all for joining us. Alastair, I really wanted to kick it off with you because you changed jobs at the beginning of all this. You joined Dropbox. Tell us a little bit about what that taught you about remote work and how it impacted how you came into the role.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. I joined Dropbox on March 24th, so in the middle of the shelter in place. So I've never been into our office to work as an employee, and I've never met anybody in my team or any of my cross-functional partners. And so I had to really think about personally, how do I build up trust in a remote environment, working remotely, and thinking about trust from a point of view of, am I credible? Is what I'm saying credible and backed by data? Am I reliable? And am I actually doing the things that I'm saying when I'm going to say them? But then also, do I care about my teammates? Do I care about the people in my organization? Because I think that's incredibly important. When we work remotely, to actually think about and empathize with the situations that employees are going through. Have they got kids working from home, as I did, on doing school? Like I had a 6-year-old doing Zoom schooling. How are my employees going through that? And how are they actually coping with that change? And so I think that really, it made me really think and be very deliberate and intentional about how I was communicating with my team and also with all of my partners.
Right. So how do you think going forward? I mean, is this going to, when you do return to the office, what is that going to look like for you, Alastair?
I think certainly at Dropbox, we've shifted to a virtual first approach. So our primary way of working will be remote, but we've created, we will still be having our offices and we're recreating them as studios where we're having intentional, meaningful moments of collaboration because we recognize the importance of bringing people together for key critical in-person moments, which I know has been spoken about a lot during the morning. And that intentionality and being deliberate and principled about when you come together, I think is the most important thing that you can do when working in a distributed fashion. And so to help our employees through this transition, we've done a number of things to try and be deliberate and intentional. So, for example, when we're working remotely, we've created core collaboration hours. That is a time where we expect employees, a 4-hour block, to be online at the same time so that they can synchronously collaborate together. The other period during their day, we want them to create their own nonlinear work days so that it works for their own personal situation. Do they need to go and pick up their kids? Do they have to look after a relative? But during that time, we recognize the importance of asynchronous collaboration. So working through Dropbox paper documents or email or Slack to asynchronously move work forward in a way that helps our customers and all of our other employees. And then the third mode is, as I mentioned, these studios. So actually making sure that when teams come together for specific activities, when they need to come together to either build culture or to collaborate on a specific problem, that they understand when to use our Dropbox studios and the office space that we have. And so I think that is going to be core to how we eventually return to work once safe and we return to the office. The last thing that I'd say on that deliberate and intentional way of working is we've created a set of really flexible, what I call practices. So it's not policy, Okay, so we have this really flexible set of practices that we've written up and shared in our Virtual First toolkit externally, so it's open sourced. These practices are frameworks and guardrails for how to communicate with your teammates, for how to look after yourself in a virtual first world when you're working from home, and how to make sure that you are being deliberate with your communications, because giving people and our employees toolkits, frameworks, practices, I think really helps create an inclusive environment for everyone at Dropbox.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so Marlo, I want to continue on this theme a little bit here. I mean, you've said before, that culture is more than a vibe, right? And so, Marlo, for you, I mean, talk a little bit about how having physical space as a crutch, you don't have that anymore. So what does that do for culture, and how has that changed how you think about it?
Sure. I think it's important to stay connected, right, and stay relevant. So in these times where you don't have the luxury of physical space, you have to over-index in the things that really constitute a relationship, right? So, for example, with our onboarding, we make sure that, during the courting phase when you're interviewing, we have interview loops so people have points of connection with individuals they could be working with at a future date, right? So you're starting to get that familiarity, right? So we also allow folks to, go through what we call our lessons of Ariel. We have different videos of leaders presenting their areas of expertise. Again, sort of a pre-onboarding look into what life could be like at Ariel. These are things that we didn't necessarily have to do pre-pandemic because they happened organically in office. So again, we're over-indexing on these touch points to establish that relationship building that we couldn't do, given this remote environment. And then during the actual physical onboarding, once someone is hired, we make sure you have an onboarding buddy. So, again, when you're walking the halls, you have the luxury of meeting people, on the fly. You can't do that in this environment. So now you have a solid go-to person that you can rely on to help remove obstacles for you as you're onboarding through Ariel. We also make sure that there are key stakeholder interviews during that first week. That point of connectivity during the first week of onboarding is essential in day-to-day physical times. Right now, it's even more important. So we want to make sure we have a robust list of key stakeholder meetings during that first week where it's really essential to feel connected and engaged with the organization. And then we have a full-on 90-day onboarding plan that we share both with the new hire as well as the onboarding manager and those peer buddies throughout, so everyone is in sync on what's expected over the first 90 days or so to stay connected.
Great. So Taher, for you, I mean, you worked and lived through SARS, right? So tell us a little bit about what you learned during that experience that you really took and implemented right away when COVID hit.
Yes, I remember that actually. I used to travel to Hong Kong and China quite a bit, and that was very scary. This time, I think once we realized something is off, and in fact, I was in our New Jersey, New York office at the time, we began to speak to our colleagues in the industry and reached out to those that we knew and basically asked, what is happening? What do you expect to happen next? And, at the time, we couldn't exactly figure out what the severity of the situation was. But we had anticipated this is going to get sort of more critical faster. And what happened to us was we were lucky in that we reached out to our industry partners who gave us some advice in terms of what they needed for us to help them and what we had to do ourselves to essentially go remote and protect ourselves and our families. So we sort of saw this coming a little sooner than maybe other companies did and took actions very proactively. I was traveling 100% of the time. And I remember I came back ready to go to California for an event, and that was it. California shut down that very week, and that never happened. So we were we were fortunate that we reached out, asked the right questions, and then took action. And we had teams that within my own organization that focused on solving the problem of, so what happens next? How do you equip people with what they need?
And what are some of those things? Walk us through what you've learned.
Yeah. So, for example, it was interesting. We with our customers, one of our customers is New York Presbyterian, actually in your area. So they had used telemedicine, and they told us that they expect the volume of this to increase rapidly. So they needed products, they needed software, they needed supplies from us, and we provided these. In fact, telemedicine increased by about 500%. We also saw that small businesses actually bifurcated. The ones who had managed to adjust basically what I call them into a prime and a subprime element. Many of the businesses did not manage to do well. Many did. Those that have survived and thrived, the use of technology and their spend has gone up by about more than 75%. Interestingly enough, in bigger organizations, we've seen that when they use technology, we have very good set of products for productivity, that tablets, devices. Right now, you have a Samsung. I'm using a Samsung PC. I have a Chromebook as a second screen, and I have a tablet to make sure I take notes, and so I'm fully set up. So we also noticed that in a large enterprise, that the new applications that are used are the top 10 are now new. These were not what people had used before. So we actually tried to put these solutions together very quickly, bundle them, and then for different verticals. And I think it evolved over time. Initially, it was help me. Then it was help me run my business. And I think the next phase will be interesting as well.
Great. So let's, Grace, let's turn to you here. I mean, we've talked about some of the ways that, we've implemented change very quickly. How do we make sure we maintain some of those lessons and that agility? I mean, how do we make sure that we don't go back to business as usual, especially when we're talking about HR here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the sense of urgency and immediacy that we all faced in running the business during the year of the pandemic, which is carrying over now to 2021, brought out the best in many companies. And in fact, it's made many of our organizations more human. And I think that's the thing that needs to capture our attention, capture our imagination in terms of what's next, really the focus on the person within the organization. Here at Chobani, we lost the power of the shift meeting due to social distancing. On occasion, our senior leaders were putting flyers on employee cars in the parking lot to get the word out, really whatever it took to make us feel connected. And I think that we'll see more of that. I think that employers will continue to invest in the individual experience, continue to invest in connectivity, and ultimately create a place where people can feel truly connected to the mission and purpose of the organization. Here at Chobani, we have a weekly town hall that's become our virtual living room. It's a place to obtain information about the organization as much as it is to feel connected to something that's real, authentic, and purposeful. And I'm excited by that. I think that it leaves a lot of options on the table in terms of where businesses will invest and the focus on people, culture, and HR going forward.
Great. So lots of chatter in the chat here about intentionality. You guys clearly hit a nerve. Thank you so much for chatting with us today. We really appreciate you being here with us.